The number one, which of the following financial tools involves an exporter sending goods to an importer before the good has been sold to a customer? So you're given there with different kinds of instruments or commercial documents. Which one describes the sending of goods prior to exporter sending goods to an importer before the good has been sold to a customer? So you transfer it first to another party before it has been sold for that other party to make the sale. You should be familiar with this one already. This what is described here is your consignment. So the answer for number one is consignment. So as you're aware, in a consignment, the risk is not on the part of the um, consignee. The risk is on the part of the consignor. Or in this case, the risk would be on the exporter and not on the importer. Number two, which of the following describes counter trading? A bank in Finland sends a notice to a seller in the United States guaranteeing that it will pay the seller on a buyer's behalf. No. A non-financial buyer in Cyprus creates a time draft whose payment is guaranteed by a bank and then gives this draft to the seller in the United States as payment for a purchase. No. A buyer in Mexico agrees to pay the seller in the United States on a specified date. Still no. The answer for number two would be a US company sells a material to a South Korean company in exchange for software. So when you are trading class goods, out of all the choices, only letter D involves trading of goods. So a counter trade is an exchange of goods or services for other goods or services. The main feature here is that no cash is involved. No cash changes hands between the parties in a counter trade, which makes it less risky for both companies. But the problem would be on the assignment of values, whether the services or goods that you are exchanging are commensurate to one another. Number three, which of the following is least likely to be benefit of a company expanding internationally? These kind of questions, class, I expect you would be able to figure out even without encountering this question uh, previously, because this basically requires common sense lang. Which is least likely to be benefit of a company expanding internationally? Meaning, three of the four choices would represent a benefit for expanding internationally. We would choose the one that is unlikely to be a benefit. Letter A, expanding to international markets gives the company the opportunity to minimize its tax bill. That's possible. You may choose to operate in a tax haven or a country that has lower tax burden. Letter B, expanding to international markets increases the chances that more investor will purchase the company's stock. That is also possible. That is a likely benefit. Letter C, expanding to international markets simplifies a company's supply chain. This is definitely not a likely benefit. And again, I expect you to be able to figure this out. If you are now expanding internationally, then your logistics would definitely be more challenging. Yes. In securing your materials or in providing your products, you will have greater challenges due to a greater scope of area. So that means letter D is also a likely benefit. Expanding to international markets increases a company's access to sources of capital. It's just connected with letter B. So again, the answer here is letter C. Number four, which of the following factors does not affect the use of the discounted cash flow method? on an international capital budgeting project compared to a domestic capital budgeting project. Obviously, again, tax laws will have an impact on your budgeting tests. Okay, and also, of course, your financial reporting requirements. Uh, Also, on the repatriation of earnings requirements, this could also be related to taxation on the income that will be earned by your investors. But regardless of where you operate class, whether domestic or internationally, the treatment of time value of money would be the same. So the answer for number four would be letter D. Time value of money would still be applied in the same manner as regardless of where you are uh, operating. Number five, the United States company sells software to a Japanese company in exchange for marketing services in Japan. What is the correct term to describe this arrangement? We should know this already. This is our counter trading. Goods from United States exchanged for services in Japan. Number six, a bank in France sends a notice to a seller in the United States guaranteeing that it will pay the seller on the buyer's behalf. What is the correct term described by this arrangement? If you have a if you have another company class, you have a bank guaranteeing class. So even if there's no money yet, you would say whatever that person will owe, I will honor it based on this document, and the answer here would be your letter of credit. So the bank is extending its credit to another person, and that person can go to another bank, and that would be honored because of the guarantee made by the first bank. Number seven, which of the following uh, describes cross-border factoring? Here, you might just be able to figure this out because out of the choices class, only one mentions of a factor does. The answer number seven is a factor in the United States contacts a factor in Greece to assist in the collection of accounts receivable. If you can remember your factoring class, these are those who are engaged in buying your receivables. And what makes it a cross-border factoring class? It crosses already borders of different countries. As I've mentioned the IRC group last week, in the CMA exam, the question will not be trying to trick you, class. Sometimes, whatever you can think of based on the choices, if it appears to be related to what is being asked for, that is already the answer. Number eight, which of the following financial tools requires payment be made upon the completion of an obligated action? This is your time draft. Okay, time drafts are bills of exchange. I hope you're familiar already with your bills of exchange. For bills of exchange, you have three parties there: the drawer, the drawee, and uh, the payee. Okay, time drafts are bills that must be paid in a specific time or upon completion of an obligated action. Okay, this is different from site drafts, as we will explain later on. Uh, I think it's number nine. Which of the following financial tools refers to bills for imports payable upon receipt? The answer for number nine would be site drafts. So site drafts, it obtained its name, class, because normally it will become payable the moment it is presented to the uh, drawing, the moment it becomes, or the moment it is seen, or it is within sight of the drawing class. And normally, you'll be able to see this uh, instrument uh, once it is presented for payment. Side graphs, once you see it. Number 10, which of the following financial tools refers to a lender guaranteeing the acceptance of a payment request from an importer? The answer here would be letters of credit, or letter A. Okay? Lender to an exporter on behalf of an importer, guaranteeing the lender will accept a draft for payment from the importer. Number 11, which of the following is least likely to be a benefit of a company expanding internationally? Again, another common sense question, class. Uh, Reducing legal and administrative expenses. Again, this is already the answer. Answer for number 11 is letter A. Aside from having problems with logistics or with your supply chain, class, understandably, cost of administration or managing the business would also increase. Definitely, your uh, administrative expenses will not go down if you expand internationally. Number 12, which of the following is least likely to be challenged in evaluating international expansion projects? Least likely. Forecasting the impact, least likely to be challenged. Forecasting the impact of foreign currency. Of course, this is an obvious challenge, class, when you are already involved in multinational projects. Choosing the correct tools to use to assess an international project. Uh, Now, regardless of geography, class, the tools to use will just be the same, or whatever challenges are there would still be there. Forecasting the tax implications, again, this is also a challenge. Choosing the correct discount rate to use to assess an international project, that's correct. Because remember, you will have to take into account political risk, and every country is exposed to different levels of political risks and environmental risk as well. Okay, so your discount rate would really be different for one country and another. So the answer here is, of course, letter B. Bravo. Number 13, which of the following is least likely to be benefit of a company expanding internationally? This time, so we're still looking for for one that is not likely to be a benefit. Letter A, expanding to international markets makes it easier to manage a company. We've mentioned this already, and this is our answer. Again, it's more difficult to manage. And you do not even need me to tell you that, guys. I'm sure you would have figured that out. Letter B is definitely, B, C, and D are, of course, likely benefit. Recession in one market would possibly be offset with growth in other markets. Increases the opportunity for company to obtain needed resources. That's correct. Expanding to international markets increases the opportunity for a company to learn best practices. Definitely. And you might think, sir, why are we going over these questions? Uh, we can answer this the first time we will encounter these questions. We don't need your help for this topic. That's correct. But one possible takeaway for today would be the tip that I am going to give you now. For this kind of questions, class, what I did when I took the CMA exam was, um, for these kind of questions, it gives you three true statements already. Okay, so uh, for multiple choice question, it appears not challenging because you will just have to choose the odd one out. But what I did when I took the CMA exam, especially in the first, sorry, especially in the second exam na, I took part 2 first because that was the schedule available first. Uh, what I did when I took the part 1 was that if I encounter these kind of questions, I wrote the true statements in the scratch paper. You will be given a scratch paper now. Okay. So out of this question, I'm sure that letter A is the answer because it is at least likely benefit. So what I did is I wrote down letter B, letter C, and letter D. But of course, not the whole sentence, just the thought. And why did I do that? I was anticipating because what if in the essay question I would be asked, give us that, can you give 3 examples of a benefit for expanding internationally? So with that, I can just easily pick out those words that I've written down and write them as my answer in the essay question. So you will encounter those kind of questions, several of those questions in the MCQ, and you can write them down so that you can use them as an answer for the essay questions. The question now is, was I able to use any of those things I have written down? The answer is no. I'm not sure if that's the rule. If it's asked in the MCQ, it will not be asked anymore in the essay. I don't think so. But I suggest you still do that because it would help in your essay class if your sentences are already constructed in uh, ways that are already sensible. Because if you're answering the exam, one of your challenge would be not just knowing the answer, but on constructing your statements. And it would help you time-wise and presentation-wise if you already have a reference. Okay, so we will encounter these kind of questions wherein it will be giving you true statements already, or you will be given correct answers to enumerations. Uh, you can set it aside. Hopefully, it can help you in your essay questions. I was only able to do that for the second exam I took, because when I took part 2 first, I only had time to prepare for the MCQ. I wasn't able to prepare for the essay because my thinking there, I just want to proceed to the essay. It would be very embarrassing if I will not be able to proceed to the essay portion of the exam. So I just focused on the uh, multiple choice practice questions. Okay, number 14. Which of the following is least? And that's also what I did for questions asking for definition, because I wrote down the definition because I'm not sure, maybe I would be asked for to give definition. Definition of terms are very easy for MCQ, but of course it will be very challenging uh, in an essay type of exam. And of course, you can always answer it in your own words. But for me, it would be better. I believe you'll be given more credit if you'll be able to give the technical definition. Which of the following is least likely to be a benefit of a company expanding internationally? Again, the same concept. The answer here would be expanding to international markets lowers a company's cost of capital. Although this can be true, but that is not a likely benefit. Yes. Compared to the other choices in this question. The answer again is letter um, B. Bravo. 15. Which of the following describes consignment? Answer here is a US company sends goods to be sold in Italy to an Italian company, and the Italian company pays for the goods only when they are sold. So answer here is letter A. Again, I'm sure you could have answered this even if you have not encountered this question previously. 16. A non-financial buyer in Germany creates a time draft whose payment is guaranteed by a bank and then gives this draft to a seller in the United States as payment for a purchase. What is the correct term to describe this arrangement? The answer here would be this is a banker's acceptances. A banker's acceptance class is when a non-financial company, meaning not a bank, writes a time draft, and then a bank guarantees that it will pay whoever presents the draft at the specified time. Okay, so um, when compared to a letter of credit class, a letter of credit originates from normally a bank, but for a banker's acceptances, um, the normally the importer or exporter will be the one to prepare this document, and it will be guaranteed by a bank. And because it is guaranteed by a bank, uh, once it is presented to another financial institution, then it would already be accepted as payment. Okay, so a banker's acceptance is a form of a bill of exchange also. Whereas in a letter of credit, it originates from a financial company or, for example, a bank. Number 17, which of the following describes a letter of credit? Answer here is letter D. A bank in Canada sends a notice to a seller in the United States guaranteeing that it will pay the seller on the buyer's behalf. And if you'll notice here, the transaction is directly with two financial institutions. Number 18, which of the following describes a banker's acceptance? The answer here is already letter A. A non-financial buyer in Japan creates a time draft whose payment is guaranteed by the bank and then gives this draft to a seller in the United States as payment for a purchase. Number 19, which of the following is not normally used to finance international transactions? Uh, Answer here would be a line of credit. A line of credit class is normally a relationship between two entities lang. Okay, so it's between you and your bank. Okay, it does not necessarily help you with cross-border transaction class. Okay, but even if you have a line of credit with another bank in an international market, it's still the same. It's still between you and that bank. Number 20, which of the following describes forfeiting? Uh, a seller in the United States sells a receivable payable in 195 days from a buyer in Italy. So forfeiting is just another term for factoring class, and it's normally a long-term arrangement. And here it would be the exporter or the seller will receive cash immediately from the forfeiter, and then uh, it would be the factor who would later on receive the uh, collection. So this is just another form of factoring class. So the answer here would be uh, letter B. Then you might ask, why is letter A not the answer? Because in forfeiting, this is something new for you. It's normally at least 180 days. So please take note. That's one takeaway for today. For forfeiting, uh, again, it's a long-term type of factoring. At least 180 days. 21. Which of the following factors has the least influence on foreign currency exchange rates? Answer here would be letter C. Okay, normally the business cycle would be the same all throughout. Inflation rates, of course, have significant influence. Plus, what are current account deficits? This is for each country class, the difference between its imports and exports. And of course, income level will also have an impact on the exchange rates. 22, I expect you to be able to answer this class, even if it involves computation. Trident Corporation recently purchased machinery parts worth 23.5 million Mexican pesos. Management needs to find out the US dollar cost of the payables. It has access to two codes for Canadian dollars. Uh, what's this? You will 1.0774 Canadian dollar is equal to $1. That's how you interpret that even class. And you have 0.0981 uh, Canadian dollars for one Mexican peso. So all you have to do is to convert the 23.5 million Mexican pesos into dollars. And this is slightly, not really difficult class, but it will take a longer process because you're not given a direct uh, exchange rate for Mexican pesos to US dollars. Okay, so one way of doing this class is to convert your Mexican pesos first into Canadian dollars. So what do? You multiply 23.5 million and then multiply that with 0.0981. Okay, that would give you the Canadian dollar equivalent of your 23.5 million. How much is that class? 23.5 million times 0.0981. So definitely it should be lower than 23.5 million. Because you only have 9 centavos plus for every Mexican peso. So converted into Canadian dollars, it is 2,305,350. Is that in the choice? Yes, but that is not yet the answer. What do? You have to convert it into US dollars first. And what rate do we have here? For every $1 US dollar, we need 1.0774 Canadian dollars. This will not be done through multiplication class because what we're looking for now is the US dollar, which is the denominator in your exchange rate. So what do? This time you divide 2,305,350 by 1.0774. So since it's divided by more than one class, we expect the answer to be lesser than 2,305,000. So the answer here would be letter C. Again, I think even grade schoolers can do this. 23. Which of the following factors does not affect foreign currency exchange rates in a floating exchange rate system? Uh, just one thing to remember lang class, in a floating exchange rate system, a benchmark is not used. Hence, the term floating, it's not fixed to a certain benchmark. And the answer here would be, obviously, it's not, the answer here would be letter D, the price of a benchmark commodity. So if the exchange rate is not tied to gold, for example, or oil, then of course the price of gold or oil will not have any effect on your foreign exchange rate. 24, the spot rate on the London market was 0.5434 per dollar, while the 90-day forward rate was 0.5519. per dollar. What is the annualized forward premium or discount on the US dollar for the period? Again, I want us to understand forward rates class as being the expected spot rates 90 days from today. Okay? As of today, we are estimating that the spot rate 90 days from now would be 0.5519. Okay, and what's happening here? Uh, I want you to understand the way the exchange rates. What happened to the rate here, class? For now, you only get 0.5434 for every dollar. Later on, later on, we expect that the spot rate would be 0.5519. So how do we view the dollar here, class? Are we saying that the dollar is expected to get stronger 90 days from now, or are we saying that the dollar would weaken 90 days from now based on the change in its exchange rate? Today is 5434. 90 days from now, we're expecting it to be 5519. What happened? It increased. So are we saying that the dollar is expected to strengthen or weaken plus 90 days from now? Strengthen plus. Why? It will now be taking more euros class for you to acquire the same amount of dollar class. Inversely, we are expecting the pound class to weaken because we need to give up more pound just for us to acquire $1 class. So, from the perspective of a dollar, the dollar then is treated or viewed as a premium class. So the question now is, how much would be the premium? The answer here would be, uh, let's compute this one. What's the difference between the forward rate and the spot rate class? Forward rate is 5519 and 5434. How much is the difference there? Is it how much? 0088285 5519 minus 5434. 85. Okay. Now the question is, what will you use as your denominator? Of course, your base, which is today, the spot rate. So, was it 0085? 0085 divided by 0.5434. How much will that give you? 1.6? 1.56. If rounded up, that would be 1.6. Is that correct? But that is not yet the answer, class. Because what does the question tell us or ask us? What is the annualized forward premium or discount? So the 1.56 is just the, you can call it the spread over the 90-day period or the premium over the 90-day period. But since we're looking for the annualized class, you can just multiply it first by 360 and divide it by 90, or simply multiply it by 4. So your 1.56 times 360 days divided by 90 days, that should give you your 6 point, is that 6.26? Then rounded up, our answer here would be letter B, 6.3 premium. So be careful class ha. One thing to remember is your denominator would be the current spot rate. And then number two, Be careful with the question since it asks for the annualized rate, then you gross it out. 25, Pharma just received revenues of 2.3 million in Australian dollars. The only quotes management received are 2.0651 per pound and 1.8538 dollars per pound. What is the US dollar value of the company's revenues? Okay, so similar to the first problem we encountered, we want to convert it into dollars. But what rate do we have? We only have Australian dollars to pounds first. So convert it to pounds first. So 2.37 to 300 divided by, because the challenge in your part here because is knowing when to divide and when to multiply. Okay, so 2.372.3 divided by 2.0651. What does that give you? It gives you the equivalent pound for your 2.372,300 Australian dollars. So that means our revenues converted into pounds would be 1,148,758 pounds. And is that in the choices? Fortunately not. So what's the next thing we do? Convert the 1.148 million pounds into US dollars. And this time you will multiply it, class. Okay, for every 1 pound, you will have 1.8538 US dollars. So how many US dollars then you will have if you have 1.148758 pounds? So what do you do? Multiply 1,148,758 pounds, then multiply it by 1.8538. That would give us our answer of 2,129,567. 26. So it would be good if you're practicing now, so that you don't have to practice on this one later on. 26. Consider two countries, country A and country B. If country A's currency is more valuable than country B's, how will country A's imports from country B be affected? Uh, who is richer here, class? If country A's currency is more valuable, how will country A's imports? So if country A is the importer, class, that means it is the one getting the goods from B. And since the money of A is worth more than the money of B, class, country A can afford more of whatever is country B is selling. So we can expect that country A would be buying more from country B. So in this case, uh, we expect the imports will increase. Assuming the same price, class, uh, you can buy more from the poorer country if you have a more valuable currency. So might as well just buy from there. So the answer here would be imports will increase. So here, if you're able to answer these kind of questions, class, this is where you should be able to develop some level of confidence, class. Okay, you really don't need any technical knowledge here. Even your common sense would be sufficient here. 27, Starlink Corporation purchased some components from a Mexican manufacturer. It has to pay 110 million Mexican pesos for the goods today. The exchange rate today is 10.3540 Mexican pesos per dollar. What is the dollar cost of this payable? You only need to make one conversion test. So how much is your payable in Mexican pesos? 110 million. How many dollars is that equivalent to? All you have to do is multiply 110 million by 10.354, correct? Wrong. So what you're going to do is to divide. But let's check though. Is that letter D in the choice? If you did that, 110 million multiplied. I think so. No. Yes, I think so. 110 times 10.354. Is that the 1,138,940,000? So here you're trying to convert it into dollars. So you know that based on the conversion rate given, the dollar is more valuable. So what are you going to do? Divide 110 million by 10.354. That should give you 10,623,913. So the answer there would be letter B. 28. This is the kind of question that you want to skip once you see it. A company in country A and a company in country B are both interested in purchasing a product from a company in country C that costs 500 units of country C's currency. The table below shows the amount of country C's currency uh, that 1 unit of each country's currency is worth at two different times. Based on this information, which statement is correct? So 1 unit of currency A today is equal. No, the C there, class. Do you see the C on 1 week ago? That should have been together with the word currency. It should be 1 unit of currency A today is equal to 50 units of currency C. There's misalignment there. 1 unit of currency B is equivalent. 1 unit of currency B today is equivalent to 44 units of currency C. Okay, please make the necessary corrections in your material. So what happened? Let's check the choices na lang. The product is cheaper today in country B than 1 week ago. Let's see if that's correct. The product is cheaper today in country B. What's happening here? A company in country A, both interested in product. It costs 500 units of country C's currency. Okay. We're looking for the correct statement, class, correct? Uh, so we need 500 units. So since today, 1 unit of currency B is equivalent to 44 units of currency C. So let's just convert it na lang. How many units of currency B are we going to need there to be able to acquire the product? So what do? You divide 500 by 44. How much is that? How much? 11.36. What is that 11.36? That is the price of that good in currency B, 11.36. And then 1 week ago it is 48 units. Okay, so what do? Divide 500 by 48. From that alone, since our divisor is bigger, class, we expect it to be cheaper 1 week ago. So definitely letter A is incorrect. Next, the product is more expensive today in country B. That's basically what we said. That's why we said letter A is incorrect. But we have to read the rest of the choice, class. Because country B's currency has strengthened relative to country C's uh, currency. The product is more expensive today. No, if your currency has strengthened, class, then goods from other countries would not have been more expensive. So that means letter B is also incorrect. Definitely, this kind of question will come out in your midterm exam. Do you have the schedule already? Is it next week now? The product, letter C, the product is more expensive today in country A than 1 week ago because country A's currency has strengthened. Because even without converting the prices, class, we know that this would be wrong. Because again, if your currency strengthened, then goods from other countries should not be more expensive. Okay, so we're left with letter D. And since this question will come out, I will just like us to continue na lang yun with the analysis. Let's compute for the equivalent price. Today, you need one unit of currency A is equivalent to 50 units of currency C. So that means today we need 10. So 500 divided by 50, we need 10 units of currency A. The price in currency A will be 10. But 1 week ago, we only needed 45 units of currency C. What happened? So, how much do we need, class? So it has not gotten cheaper. 500 divided by 45. 500, how much is 500 divided by 45? I know it's gotten cheaper because this is 1 week ago. So 100 divided by 45 is that 9.091 class? No, it should be 11. 11.11. So 1 week ago, its price is 11 and now it's just 10. So it has gotten cheaper because country A's currency has strengthened. So I think one of the things that makes this challenging is because the first information given is the price today. I think it would have been better if it would have been friendlier to you if what was given was 1 week ago instead of the price today. 29. Which type of foreign exchange system requires a country to maintain its currency at or near a benchmark value? This is your fixed exchange rate system. Okay. In a fixed exchange rate system, a country is required to maintain its currency at or near a benchmark value, such as another country's currency or the value of a commodity, such as gold. Number 30, which of the following statements concerning foreign exchange rates is correct? Letter A floating exchange rate system provides investors the opportunity to profit from exchange rate fluctuations. This is correct. And this is already the answer. So that means B, C, and D must be incorrect. A managed floating exchange rate system results in stable uh, exchange rates. It's not necessarily stable because again it will be affected by supply and demand since it is not uh, attached or fixed to a certain benchmark. Letter C, a fixed exchange rate system provides governments the ability to take actions to expand or reduce their monetary supply. A floating exchange rate system reduces uncertainty. No. Again, the answer is letter A. Plus, how many items is the sun out gas? 64 will end at 32. Which of the following is an example of an indirect exchange rate from an American perspective? Our still at 31. Uh, Xilex Corporation's German unit is looking to borrow 4.5 million from Deutsche Bank. Deutsche Bank quotes a rate of 3-month LIBOR plus 0.5% for the 90-day loan. I forgot what LIBOR stands for, guys. I think L is London, R is rate. I forgot. Currently, the 3-month LIBOR rate is 4.175%. If the exchange rate on the payoff date is 0.8334 per dollar, what is Xilex interest cost in US dollars? So you'll be able to compute your interest in terms of euros class. But aside from doing that, you need to convert it into dollars. So the first question is, what rate are you going to use to compute for your interest? Okay? Since it says that you are quoted at a rate of the 3-month LIBOR plus 0.5%, so what I want you to do is just follow instructions. How much is the LIBOR rate? 4.175. You add, technically it's redundant to call it LIBOR rate, but that's what I'm used to. So 4.175% plus 0.5%. Because it would be travesty class if what you do is add 4 and 5 plus. Not understanding the difference of what is 4% and 0.5%. Okay, so 4.175 plus 0.5%. That should not be 9% kasi, that should be 4.675%. You multiply that with the principal. How much is the principal? 4.5 million. But of course, kasi when you do that, that would already be good for 1 year. What should you do? The loan is only for 90 days. So 4.5 million times 4.675% times 90 divided by 360. Use 360. So that means your interest in terms of pounds would be, in terms of euro would be 52,593.75. And that is not yet the answer because you have to convert that into dollars first. So what do you do? Divide or times? 52,593.75 divided by 0.8334. That should give you 63,107.45. The answer is letter A. Let's just end here.